to everyone. Thank you. Are you all set? Okay, we all set here. Thank you for joining us this morning as we present the 2022 Erie County proposed budget. And at the end, I'll also give a brief update for COVID-19. I've not had an update in person in quite some time, about a month, I think, or so. Pleased to be joined by a few members of our budget staff. We have our budget director, Robert Keating, here, Deputy Budget Director, Ben Swanenkamp, and then we have Kim Kadish and Ken Schlosser from the Budget Office, too. So thank you for being here and all the good work that they've done on the 2022 budget. 2022 budget is actually three big documents. It's a message and summary that you can find online. The Book A, which is our general operating funds, which is the vast majority of county government's financing, and then Book B, which is special funds, which are grant funds. All of this will eventually be able to be found online so that anyone can go through the budget book if they so choose. Just give you a little different idea. Here's the budget book for 1960. Now, they didn't list everything back then. This is transparent government. This wasn't always transparent government, in which they just put a dollar amount for a certain department. But it's a little different today than it was back then. As always, we have our friends from Deaf Access Services. Jennifer is here today to provide us American Sign Language from Deaf Access Services. So thank you for being here today. And let's just get to it. We have breakdowns in the budget books. You'll find this in the executive summary on the expenses as well as the revenue lines, where they're coming from. It is approximately a $1.6 billion budget in total, and this goes to show that when it comes to expenses, the vast majority of it, or not majority, but near 50% of it goes to the health and human services aspect, and then the economic and community development, which includes sales tax that is shared, roughly makes up about 60 to 70% of the budget. And then the smaller areas there are some of the other lines that people think of, like public safety, our general services, our parks department, our emergency services, public works. They all are in a smaller portion of it. The vast majority of county government goes for health and human services and also for sales tax that we share with our partners in local government. And then the revenues are made up by many different lines, the primary one being sales tax, the sales tax that's retained by Erie County, the sales tax that we share with local governments, the other money that we receive from state and federal resources, grant funding and the like, and property taxes. As you can see on this slide here, sales tax retained by Erie County, we have nearly 28% of all sales tax of our budget, our revenues, are from sales taxes that are retained by Erie County, and our property tax only makes up a little over 16%. So the property taxes are not the largest revenue source when it comes to Erie County, and we have some great news to announce with regards to the property tax rate going forward. If you look at the budgets from year to year, the 2020 adopted budget was, of course, adopted at the end of 2019. That was pre-COVID. It was a $1.55 billion budget, had 4,553 positions as of the adopted 2020 budget. You go through the deficit remediation plan we had, the adopted budget in 2021, the adjusted budget in 2021 with our renew plan, and where we are today. It's a $1.66 billion budget, though we have less jobs in Erie County, and we'll propose to have less jobs as of January 1st of 2022 than we actually had in 2020. As I said, in 2020 we had 4,553 positions in county government. January 1st, if this budget gets passed as is, it would be 4,432 jobs. So it's still less than where we were with the 2020 budget, though we have restored a number of positions that were cut as a result of the deficit remediation plan because of COVID, and we're adding a few new positions based on need in county government. Some of them we'll talk today. Just a general fun note, so to speak, it is an economic paradigm shift from where we were to where we are today. Remember, when I proposed my budget for 2021, we were looking at 20% across the board state aid cuts. Those state aid cuts have been eliminated. We were looking at tremendous revenue loss due to sales tax loss. that has rebounded. So what we're seeing is growth in the budget from the amended 2021 budget of 6.2%. We're kind of on track back where we were prior to COVID with regards to growth. You usually see 2 to 3% growth, and we had a huge cut, of course, with regards to the 2021 budget from where we were in 2020, and it's primarily because of some great numbers that we're seeing with the rebounding economy and our sales tax. We are going to share that sales tax, of course, that's rebounding, so the growth in the sales tax is shared with our partners in city, towns, villages, and school districts. So for a lot of districts that have been hurting financially, they're going to be receiving additional money in 2022 because of the sales tax sharing, and we're going to see just some great growth across the board in county government as it pertains to investments in our community assets. Once again, the sales tax growth, it's been a big growth in 2020, 22.8%. This is not normal. This is because we had such a bad 2020. It's 13.6% growth over 2019. A lot of it is being driven by internet sales. And prior to, I think it was 2019, the county didn't even receive a penny of internet sales tax. New York State handled all of it. And then there was a case that was decided in the Supreme Court in 2019, Wayfair versus South Dakota, that said that it was a fight by Wayfair, the retailer, that they did not need to pay sales tax to out-of-state municipalities and states. Went up to the Supreme Court, and the answer was, no, you got to pay sales tax to all. So they're collecting sales tax regardless of where the person may be purchasing the goods. So if you bought something that is being sold out of South Dakota, previously you wouldn't have paid sales tax, now you're paying sales tax. It goes to the state, goes to the local government, and we're receiving a good portion of our new revenue is associated with internet sales tax. So even though we've seen some issues associated with retailers locally, the Galleria Mall is not the Galleria Mall it used to be. Eastern Hills Mall isn't even a mall anymore. Our retail sales numbers are actually very high due to internet sales. And going forward, we have a conservative budget for growth of 2% based on where we think we're going to end this year. We don't expect to get 22% growth annually. We never have. We usually have 2 to 3% growth. But we are expecting that after this kind of rebounding year, things will balance out and we'll be back to 2% growth in sales tax for 2022. Property tax rate. A lot of people like to talk about property taxes, and they are an issue in this area. Erie County, as a portion of your property tax bill, has one of the lowest components of your property tax bill. When people get their property taxes, they're often the same time they get their town taxes, their city taxes, their school district taxes. Actually, they're sent out often by Erie County combined. Ours is the smallest component of most property tax bills, and our property tax continues to drop. The rate is going to be $4.33 per thousand, which is lower than $4.42 in 2021. And when I came into office, it was a little over $5. I think it was $5.03 per thousand. So we've actually dropped it since 2012. And here's the numbers to show the property tax rate on a graph where it was at, truthfully, the end of the Gorski administration. It was nearly $10 per thousand. For what people were paying. So if you had a $100,000 home, you were paying $10 per thousand. So people would have been paying much more than where we are today. And you can see the slight decline during the last few years after it pretty much stayed level from 2006 through 2000 and pretty much 18, and then we started to have to drop. Since 2012, the tax rate has decreased 14%. We've talked about how we're reducing taxes. It is decreasing 14%. It will be $4.33 per thousand. Stays underneath the New York State property tax cap number. The tax cap was 2% growth, which of course we know inflation is very high. It's 5 or 6%. So this is roughly 1/3 of the growth that we've seen in inflation in the last year. So it's only 2% growth. And we are very proud to present this budget, which includes this low tax rate. It's the lowest property tax rate in modern county history. We can go back many years. It is the lowest property tax rate any county executive has ever presented to the people of Erie County. Has never been lower, even going back to 1960, in which that was the year in which basically the county executive was determined to go in existence. We haven't looked in the books to the 1930s or 1920s, but we know going back at least 60 years, it's the lowest property tax rate in modern county history. We wanted to get some comment from some of our constituents, and they were very happy to hear about that. Hey, you gotta have fun every now and then. So I personally enjoy ELF. But 90% of the county budget is mandated, so people always wonder where this money's going, and it's mandated. We've talked about this before in the past. These are the services that are mandated by federal and state government for county budget. Medicaid, family assistance, child welfare protection. It goes across the board. I mean, most people don't realize the services that county government provides because they are so tailored for primarily health and human services areas. They talk about roads, and we'll talk a little bit about roads as well. But there's a lot of services that county government provides to protect the welfare of our community. I think people found out a lot more about it in the last 2 years with COVID-19 than they knew before about a lot of the work that we did and do, but now I think people understand a lot more. The county government is primarily there to protect the public and the health and welfare of our citizens. Now we have a number of programs that are new. We have a $10 million storefront revitalization grant program to assist small business owners renovate and improve their storefronts. It's based off of the very popular federal community development block grant program for storefront revitalization. So it can be used for roofs, windows, awnings, signage, to improve streetscapes and walkability. The community development block grant that we administer in Erie County is through about 34 municipalities. It's a consortium. It does not include the city of Buffalo, does not include Amherst, does not include Tonawanda. So we normally cannot provide through the community development block grant program the assistance for the storefront revitalization because those communities get money from HUD separately. This program is being sponsored by full county tax dollars, no federal share, so it's open to the entire county. Doesn't matter where you live. If you have a storefront on Bailey Avenue in Buffalo, if you have a storefront on Elmwood Avenue in Kenmore, it doesn't matter if you have a storefront on Savage Road in Sardinia, Main Street in Springville, doesn't matter where it is. You can qualify for this program. A lot more will be announced as we get through this upcoming months, and then the program will go into effect, of course, because this is for 2022 as of January 1st, but we want to invest money back into our small businesses to help grow our community. We know when we invest in storefront revitalization, it can reinvest an entire neighborhood. We've seen that. Springville's a very good example. Community Development Block Grant has been used there. Hamburg's another good example where storefront revitalization has completely changed these village centers, and we want to do that across the entire county. We're creating a $9 million workforce development pilot program in conjunction with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta to provide a bridge to the middle class for those who are currently receiving public assistance. We know that there's something called the benefits cliff, which is there gets to a point where someone who receives public assistance is making so much money in their job that they no longer receive public assistance. But they can't take that extra salary because they lose like a child care subsidy, or they lose assistance with regards to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which actually pays for it and helps provide them food. So working with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, we've actually been able to determine it's pretty much a 2-year window where an individual needs help in that 2 years, where they would be disqualified from public assistance until 2 years later, in which they'd probably make enough money that they would be making more than they would have received from public assistance before. So we're putting $9 million into a pilot program, $4.5 million over a 2-year period. We're putting the $9 million right up front. So this is for 22 and 23. And it's to get people over the benefits cliff, to provide them the resources and support that they need to move into higher paying career. The best example of it that I can give that most people will understand is moving from an LPN to an RN. LPNs get paid substantially less than a registered nurse. But if you can educate yourself and move into the registered nurse field, you will make a lot more money in a very short period of time. And what we'll find out is people who want to be RNs can't because they're LPNs, but they receive assistance from the government that they would lose if they tried to move up and educate themselves. So this bridge to the middle class will help pay for costs of educating an individual. It will also help offset if they lose child care subsidies because they no longer qualify. We will still provide them child care subsidy dollars, so to speak, for a 2-year period. And we're going to be working with the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo and the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership on this program going forward. It's a pilot program. It's not meant to address thousands of individuals. We believe we'll be able to help about 200 families. And we're going to take that information, working with the Federal Reserve Bank, and go back and say, is it worthwhile or is it not? We think it will be worthwhile. We think by getting people off public assistance into a job that pays them a good salary, it's not only going to create a better life for them, it's going to reduce the amount of money that Erie County and the government pays in the long run with regards to public assistance. So it's a pilot program. We're very proud to be working with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta on this, and it's something that we think will make a difference. And in the long run, will create better lives for individuals and save taxpayers money. That's a win-win in my book. We continue to respond to COVID-19. The 2022 budget is also part of the Renew Plan and American Rescue Plan funding. We'll establish a 4-year, $24 million COVID-19 response fund, 100% federally funded by the American Rescue Plan dollars, to ensure that we can continue to contact trace, test, offer vaccination pods, school monitoring and testing, and other COVID-19 related pandemic. So we're taking the money from the American Rescue Plan second tranche, which we'll receive in May. We'll go through a little bit more about that, and we're just designating it right away, $24 million over 4 years, so it's basically $6 million a year, which will go to COVID-19 response. We're investing in our workforce, our county workforce. Given the positive developments, department heads, including independently elected officials, were asked to submit justifications for new requests. If a department did not submit a justification for a new request that they put in the budget, they didn't get it. It's as simple as that. If they didn't feel that they could justify it to our budget office and myself, they didn't get it. So not every job request that came in was approved. We rejected quite a few. But we did increase others, including we're doing an overhaul of the park seasonal staff to better pay and match the real minimum wage per hour, changing the titles, making certain that it meets the new minimum wage requirements, and will improve the quality of the recreational services we provide. We're eliminating infrastructure bottlenecks by creating a new attorney in the county attorney's office, which is going to be dedicated only for Department of Public Works and Parks projects. Could be environmental planning projects, basically a project attorney, because we have so many projects coming through with the American Rescue Plan and Renew dollars. We don't want to have a bottleneck, the old red tape you often hear about, where it gets stuck in bureaucratic land, sitting on an attorney's desk for months. So we're going to be doing that, as well as increasing highway engineers and project managers to get these projects going and completed as quickly as possible. We're creating a new recreational and dining service program for our seniors. One thing we learned with COVID-19 is how seniors need to basically have fellowship, so to speak, but also to get them the food that they need. Many seniors used to travel to senior centers and community centers for food. A lot of them stopped doing that, of course, with regards to COVID-19 when those centers were shut down. And we did Meals on Wheels. We provided additional money for Meals on Wheels. But now that the centers are back up and running, we're finding out a lot of seniors still are not going to the centers. They're afraid to go in public. They don't want to go where they know COVID-19 is, including the Delta variant, even if they've been vaccinated. So what we're doing is we're using what we've learned over the last year. We're implementing a couple different styles of programs with regards to dining services and recreational services for seniors, including, to give an example, currently, if something's going on at the Amherst Senior Center, only people at the Amherst Senior Center can see it. But now we're going to allow them to basically work together. So Amherst Seniors information could be sent by video to someone at the Hamburg Senior Center, and so on, and other community centers, so that people can take advantage of all the programs that we have, especially a lot of virtual programs that right now may only be available on a YouTube station, or if you're in person at a senior center. If you're at another senior center, you can't take advantage of it. So we're going to tie that all together using the latest technology to bring seniors from our county across together. We're going to find better ways to ensure that they're eating healthy food by working on different dining aspects. And then we're expanding the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity to meet its expanded compliance requirements under current law and the MWBE law that's currently under consideration at the legislature. We've been really hammered with compliance requirements on the equal employment opportunity aspect of it to ensure that job goals are being met, as well as other provisions out there. So we're doing an increase in the Equal Employment Opportunity Office as well. We're investing in law enforcement. You often hear a lot about defund the police. One thing my administration has not done is defund the police. We've actually invested in law enforcement by investing in our sheriff's office, investing in our central police services. We've done that in past years, and we continue to do that. The district attorney's office is actually receiving 14 new positions. The office and department in county government that's having the largest growth is actually the district attorney's office. And these are all related to bail and discovery reform challenges that have come up. We also are making more competitive salaries for our clerical staff. We realize that we have difficulty attracting individuals in the professional area, paralegals and such, because if we're paying substantially less than what local law firms are, we're not going to be able to get good paralegals to work on our projects. So we're increasing and creating competitive salaries for clerical staff. Something that has not been done, we think, since at least the Gallivan administration and maybe the Thomas Higgins administration, is we're restoring the Chief of Internal Affairs in the Sheriff's Office. This was actually requested by the Sheriff's Office, even though the Sheriff is leaving at the end of this year. The Sheriff's Office did say it makes sense to restore the Chief of Internal Affairs, so that office will be restored to ensure that there is a place to go internally with regards to analysis associated with problems in the Sheriff's Office. We're enhancing the Central Police Services Department with additional 911 call takers and additional money for our crime lab for forensic experts and machines to do the work. We know what's gone on in the city in the last year with the increase in violence, especially gun violence. All that gun data comes to us, comes to our Central Police Services Crime Lab. DNA data comes to the Central Police Services Crime Lab. And so we need to ensure we're keeping up with what unfortunately has been an increase in violence so that they can close those cases as quickly as possible. So we're investing in the Central Police Services area. You often hear about defunding the police. People like to point the finger at Democrats. I'm a Democrat, but one thing my administration has never done is defund the police. We've invested in our law enforcement wisely. People's mandates. We've talked about the people's mandates for a long time. You hear about federal and state mandates. Well, the people's mandates. It's the library, the parks, the arts and culturals. We're investing in all of those as well. We're increasing positions in the Parks Department. We're doing a lot of projects going in the Parks Department. But arts and cultural funding is increasing by 3.4% over 2021. We'll be investing nearly $37 million in our local arts and cultural community. It's the largest funding that the county has ever seen for arts and culturals. We are investing in our arts and culturals because they improve our quality of life. We've increased the contribution of Erie County to our community college, SUNY Erie, by $1 million. We actually announced that a couple months ago, but it's officially in the budget now. So when the amount comes for next year's payment, the college will be receiving $1 million. If you remember when we announced it, we did that for various reasons, but the primary reason was to ensure that students would not have to pay a tuition increase. And we're meeting our commitment that we made, which was to increase our funding by $1 million. And this is permanent. Once we do this, we can't cut it back. It's permanently will be increased by $1 million to the community college now. And library funding will see an increase of $518,000, which will be spread in the library system. Erie County owns the central library, but then we maintain the operating of the system, while the towns, cities, and villages own the smaller libraries. And we're increasing our funding for the system by $518,000. I talked a little bit earlier about the American Rescue Plan. We're receiving what's called Tranche 2, the second part, $89 million in May of this year, rather than wait until then, because we've already got a plan on how we're going to spend it as part of the Renew Plan. We have it right in the budget. We have $34 million allocated for the installation and initial operating expenses of ErieNet. ErieNet, of course, is to deliver a 400-mile high-speed fiber system across the entire county, connecting every city, every town, every village in Erie County, which then can be tapped into by private parties to actually provide the final mile services, like you see right now in the city of Buffalo with Greenlight Networks. Well, we've talked to Greenlight Networks. They're very interested in tapping into ErieNet and other parts of Erie County. But we're investing the $34 million, the American Rescue Plan funds, specifically state it can be provided and paid for high fiber internet, and that's what we're doing. We're doing 31 million plus of sewer improvements. These are shovel-ready projects, which will be getting going in 2022, 23, and 24. Has to be spent in a certain time period under the American Rescue Plan. And those projects will be funded, needed projects, which then take it off of the backs of local ratepayers. Normally, we'd have to bond for these projects, and the amount of money would be paid by local taxpayers, local ratepayers. That's not going to happen. It's now going to be paid for out of American Rescue Plan funds, so our ratepayers are not going to have to pay for the cost associated with the investment in these sewer districts. And of course, we already talked about the $24 million that we're setting aside for 4 years for the COVID-19 response. And if we don't need it, it could always be reallocated under the American Rescue Plan for approved projects. It can't be used for particular things. One thing I do want to note, because we had some criticism as to why we were not just reducing taxes using the American Rescue Plan funds, the American Rescue Plan law specifically states you cannot use it to cut your taxes. It's supposed to stimulate the economy. You want to invest it in projects where people are being put to work. You want to invest it in COVID-19 response. There was one particular person in county government saying we should give everybody the money that we got from the American Rescue Plan back in a tax cut. Well, that would be silly because we wouldn't be stimulating our economy, but it's prohibited under the law, just so people understand that. Capital spending. You hanging in there, Jennifer? Capital spending. We're seeing a significant increase in our infrastructure spending from 2021 to 2022. We had allocated $51 million in adopted 2021 budget. That's being increased to $76 million in total. The combined highway department or division of the public works spending for 2022 is $77 million. For those who aren't saying we're not spending enough money on our roads, we spent a lot of money on our roads. Our roads are rated by an independent agency, the Greater Buffalo Niagara Transportation Council, and they are rated the highest now since the Gorski administrations on a scale of 0 to 10, or 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the worst. Our roads are rated over 7. They haven't been over 7 since the Gorski administration because we've been spending a lot of money on our highways. $77 million is going to be spent next year. Now, these major projects include Borden Road, Kenmore Avenue, Elmwood Avenue, in Tonawanda, and William Street in Cheektowaga. Those are just some of the big projects, federal aid projects, where we're also contributing. And then there's lots of roads across Erie County that will be invested in next year. As a reminder, Erie County, as a government, does not own a single lane mile of road in the city of Buffalo. It's either owned by the city or the state. So all these other spending is for the rest of the county, for the 1,200 centerline miles of roads that we have, which is equal to 2,400 lane miles of roads. If you just you started a one-lane road and blacktopped it all the way across the United States, you'd run into the Pacific Ocean. That's how many miles of roads we have, which are more miles of roads that the county owns and controls than the states of Delaware, Rhode Island, and Hawaii each have in total. Pretty impressive. So, the proposed 22 budget, it's a fiscally responsible budget that provides for important services, reduces the tax rate from $4.42 per thousand to $4.33 per thousand, the lowest tax rate in modern history. Once again, stays under the New York State tax cap. It funds the people's mandates like libraries, arts and cultural institutions, parks, and we're also coming up with some very unique programs partnering with others in government, like the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, as well as our friends in the not-for-profit and private sector community, like the Buffalo Niagara Partnership and the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo, to assist people to get out of public assistance and help our small businesses grow. The 4-year plan, it's 2-year property tax increase from assessment growth. It's not a lot. It's much less than what the rate of inflation is. We're projecting modest sales tax growth in future years of 1% in the 4-year plan. after a 2% proposal for next year. It proposes no fund balance usage, modest surpluses in future years. One of the things that Erie County has to do, ever since the red-green fiscal crisis, is come up with a 4-year plan and submit it to our fiscal authority, which still does exist. They don't do much work because we've been able to manage our finances well, but we do have to submit it to them, and it's good to have a 4-year plan. Actually, every government should have a 4-year plan. If they don't have a 4-year plan, it actually hurts as you need to look out in the future and think about where you're going to be spending your money. So once again, Erie County leads the way with regards to the budget, and we also lead the way with regards to COVID. So I'm going to give a very brief COVID response because we haven't talked about one in a while. There are actually more than 100,000 cases that have been identified since the beginning of COVID. These are unique cases. So more than 10% of Erie County's population, we can confirm, has had a COVID-19 case. 101,589 unique COVID-19 cases. There were 277 new cases on October 2nd. The positivity rate for October 2nd, according to New York State, was 4.1%. So of all the tests that were done, 4.1% came back positive. In fact, we've had 1,756 new cases over the last 7 days. We've been seeing growth, there's no doubt. We've been seeing growth. It's not great, tremendous growth, but we have been seeing growth in new cases. The average per 100,000 residents for Erie County is 184 new cases over the last 7 days, though there are some communities, as we announced last week in our briefing that was sent out to the local media, that are much higher. The town of Holland had a rate of over 500 new cases per 100,000 residents. Akron and Newstead had over 300, 400. Some were in the 200 range. So there are some suburbs and communities that have very high COVID rates in the last week or two. And that's why I thought it was important to once again brief media as we're finishing up the budget presentation. Hospitalizations, let's show a little bit more about those in the chart later. Levels of county community transmission, pretty much the entire country is in the high category. There are some areas where they're seeing reductions. I'm actually really glad to see some yellow in Mississippi, Alabama, because Louisiana, because it had been really bad down there, so things are moderating as they've gotten their vaccine rates up. And there's really no part of the United States that's really good right now, except for maybe our friends in Puerto Rico. Hospitalization data for September 17th to October 2nd. Hospitalizations have flattened in the past week. As you can see, it was 143 cases at the end, was it September 25th, 24th, somewhere around there, and we had 141 cases on October 2nd. ICUs have been pretty much the same for the last 10 days in numbers. Airway assist, roughly 2/3 of individuals that are in the ICU are on an airway assist, and approximately 25% of all patients that are hospitalized, that have been admitted to the hospital, are admitted with COVID, or that are of the COVID patients are in the ICU. Something that we have talked about a little bit recently, but I think is very important, is we've heard a lot about the waits at hospital emergency departments. And one of the driving factors to that is there are a lot of people who are going to the hospital emergency departments who are sick with what they think is COVID or is confirmed to be COVID, but they're not sick enough to be admitted. So it's determined whether they're COVID-19 positive or whether they have a very bad case of bronchitis. But depending on their level of illness, if they need hospitalization, they'll be hospitalized. If they don't, they'll be sent home with prescriptions for appropriate medication. So if you are very sick or ill, or you have an accident and you need to go to the hospital, if it's not an emergency life-threatening situation, you are going to wait at area hospitals. And we know what's happening at Mercy Hospital, where pretty much all major patients are being directed away from Mercy Hospital and going to other hospitals in the area. So that is a concern, that we are seeing a lot of people who are going to the hospitals that are positive with COVID, but they're not sick enough to be admitted. I'm real happy they're not sick enough to be admitted, but it's a concern because it's delaying response times in hospitals, where some people are waiting 8 to 10 hours to get service in hospitals just because there's so many people going to hospitals. And then you look at the data chart as it pertains to the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. with regards to hospitalization rates. Vaccines are working. They are reducing hospitalizations and saving lives. It's as simple as that. The hospital admissions are lower than they were last spring, in winter and this past spring. What did we not have during those periods? We did not have the Delta variant, which is so much more virulent. But it's so great to see that even though there are people having to go to the hospital, unfortunately, I should say fortunately, there's not as many that are being hospitalized, even though the Delta variant is much more transmissible. I do want to go back one slide because I do want to bring up the final thing I didn't talk about, which is 15 persons have died in the hospital from COVID-19 complications in the past 7 days. Another 3 individuals die on October 2nd. We are seeing the stories of individuals who are not vaccinated who have perished from COVID-19. I want to commend Dan and Katie Hamister for talking about their father's story, one of the most well-known business leaders in this community, a gentleman who is in good physical health, who caught COVID-19 and unfortunately died from it, Mark Hamister. There are lots of stories like that of these 15 people that died in the hospital the last 7 days. Majority of them are individuals who should be alive today, but they didn't get vaccinated. Yes, there are some very old people who have been vaccinated who are perishing from COVID-19. They haven't gotten a booster yet, and the average age of death for those who've been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, who have perished from COVID since I think the beginning of July is around 81 that have been vaccinated. The unvaccinated is a much lower number. It's below 70. And we know there are people who unfortunately died in the last few months who should be alive, but they didn't get vaccinated. And when we talk about vaccination, I do want to give an update. And these numbers will be a little different than what you're seeing on the New York Forward site, the vaccine tracker. This is something I've talked about with the state, and it's something that everyone's dealing with. But we now have new numbers for the census. The Erie County Census has identified that there's 954,000 residents in Erie County. The numbers that you find on the New York site for all of New York State are based off of the 2019 estimates from the census. So we've grown. That's a great thing that we've grown. But it also means that the total number of residents that we vaccinated in Erie County is actually slightly less than what the percentages were under the 2019 census estimates, because now we actually have the hard numbers of how many people we have and how many people are 18 and older. So the census for the entire county of 2020 for first dose, 63.7% of all county residents have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and 58.6% of county residents under the 2020 census numbers have received a second or completed their vaccine regimen if they got a Johnson & Johnson. So it's slightly lower than what you'll find on the New York State site. For our friends in the rest of the Western New York counties where they actually saw a decrease in population, that means that their percentage of those vaccinated in the other counties is probably higher. You have to break it down and look at what the new 2020 census numbers are. The state hasn't changed it. The federal government hasn't changed it. When they're doing analysis state by state, they're still basing it off of the prior numbers. They're not basing it off the current numbers. I thought it was important that we know what the current numbers are so that we actually understand that 63.7% of Erie County's population has received one dose, 58.6% are fully vaccinated. We can and need to do better. There's vaccination clinics all across the county, various locations. You can go to pharmacies, walk in any one of the major pharmacies, and you can get vaccinated. Please do it. Too many people in the last few months have died from COVID-19 in Erie County who are unvaccinated, who should be alive today, and in all likelihood would be alive today if they had been vaccinated. And if you don't believe me, just listen to the story of the Hamister children, because their story is a real one. I think their father was 69 years old, in good health, and unfortunately he caught COVID and perished from it. That is a story I do not want to hear anymore, but unfortunately I've heard lots of those in the last 6 months of individuals who could have been vaccinated but didn't get their vaccine dose. So with that, I'll open it up to questions on the budget or any questions with regards to COVID-19.
Mark, I read this morning $5 million you just describe, what kind of maintenance this is, and also just relate to that, if there was a new stadium, would the dollar figure really be the same amount?
Well, there's a little over $2 million that's coming from county government. There's a contribution from state as well. It's all part of the 2013 lease agreement. It's another mandated expense. But when you have a facility that large, you can spend $2 million of county money real quickly just on concrete repairs, HVAC. If a boiler goes down, we got to put a new boiler in. Some of the boilers at the stadium are $500,000 a piece, these big monster ones. So, and then even the smaller ones can be $50,000 a piece. So the money that's being put in there is not something that we are looking at like a new fancy kind of thing that the public sees. It's there for the structure of the facility as well as HVAC purposes. It's an older facility, I'm not going to deny that. But we do have a lease. It runs through next year and or 2023, and there's work that we're going to have to do in the off season. Everybody knows yesterday that some of the screens and power went out at the stadium. There was a power spike in the region, in the area, and basically the surge protectors of the stadium shut down a lot of stuff so the power didn't burn out the scoreboards. People said, what happened to the scoreboards? There was a power surge as a result of an issue outside of the stadium. I think it had to do with a car accident, truthfully. We're looking in to get more information, but basically our giant internal surge protectors shut down the scoreboards so they wouldn't implode from the power surge. Those are the kind of things you got to work on when you have a stadium this large, and that dates back to 1973. Negotiations are ongoing, but I think everyone understands the state is completing its report. It's an AECOM report. That report, as the governor announced, will be released to the public. It will be a driving factor as to whether or not there is a new stadium or it's a renovation and a location. And until such time we have that, I think we need to once again understand that negotiations will pick up once we have that report and both the state and county feel comfortable about the direction we're going. Steve?
About the stadium, Mark, any reaction to the cost of graduations at Highmark Stadium, and if you think maybe Erie County should have been involved in that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Our
What?
I-team released a report today saying that the stadium, it costs like tens of thousands of dollars for schools to have their graduations. Frontier District, $21,000, Orchard Park, $19,000, Hamburg, $21,000 to have the graduations there.
Questions with regards to graduations at the stadium and costs associated with it. I'm not familiar with the dollar number you talked about. We do seek from the bills the ability to allow other community events there. And during COVID, they could not have all the parents and family members congregate in the auditoriums at some of these schools. So as we know, there were outdoor graduations that were held. I don't think that's a bad thing, that a grandmother could see their grandchild graduate along with their parents, or the friends and family could, because you could spread them out safely in the football stadium. I don't think that's a bad thing. And our lease does allow other events to be held there than just football games or what the Bills want to do. We are allowed to hold community events there, and the Bills, I think, were supportive of holding these graduations. I don't know anything about the particular cost, but I will say this: if someone was able to witness their child or their grandchild or their guardian, their stepchild, so to speak, graduate from high school, that's not a bad thing. If they would have otherwise been prevented if they only had one parent or one guardian that could attend a closed session indoors at an auditorium in a school. Steve?
Questions on both subjects. In terms of COVID, vaccination continues to be a major emphasis of your administration. Demographically, who are we talking about who are unvaccinated? Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it male? Is it female? Is it older? Is it younger? Is it white, brown, black? I mean, who are we talking about that has been most challenging in terms of getting a better vaccination rate, if you will?
The question, in case people outside didn't hear it, was regarding vaccinations and what are the challenges, what racial groups may or may not be the challenge, ages, demographics. I can tell you this: it's women, females have a much higher vaccination rate compared to males, including in all age categories except I think the extreme seniors. We've done a really good job of vaccinating our 65-plus population. We've done actually a really good job in vaccinating most people over the age of 50. We have some issues in the 21 to 35 age category. It's not as high as we'd like. A lot of individuals think I'm young, I don't have to worry about it, but I know someone under the age of 30 just died like in the last month. In Chautauqua County, we had 3 individuals, I think, in the last month die under the age of 40 in Erie County. So just because you're younger doesn't mean you can't get sick. We have, interestingly, some similar numbers in some parts of the city of Buffalo with regards to vaccination rates as we do in some of the more rural areas of Erie County, where it's only like 50% of the people in those communities that have been vaccinated. Then you look at some suburban areas as well as parts of the city of Buffalo, and they're nearly 90%. So there's no one driving factor. I think there's still, among some individuals, a distrust in vaccines for various reasons. And our goal is to work with our partners privately. We've been doing it quietly, sort of behind the scenes, to get individuals accurate information. So if they don't trust me, if they don't trust the president saying get vaccinated, perhaps they trust their pastor. Perhaps they trust the supervisor of their town, who might be the same political party as they are, but they're not the same political party as me. I'll give you an example. John Tobiah, the supervisor of the town of North Collins, Republican, strong advocate for vaccines, has talked to a lot of people in the town of North Collins about, hey, you need to get vaccinated. This really matters. It can save your life. We've seen people who've gotten sick or people who've died. So you need to have those boots on the ground that are in the communities, whether it's a pastor on the east side of Buffalo or Supervisor Tobiah in North Collins, who people trust. And they may not believe me, but they believe them. So those are the things that are working kind of behind the scenes to ensure that the people who might get vaccinated, who are not 100% against it, those who are not anti-vax, but just aren't really sure, that's how we're slowly and surely seeing an increase in the vaccination rates.
Generally, we talk about people of color that are challenging for the county to get vaccinated.
It's been an issue, and a lot of it has to do with just untrusting a government, the Tuskegee experiment years ago. And there's legitimate reasons why people of color may not trust the government when we're saying take a vaccine. And that's why it's very important, like we have Pastor Kinzer Pointer or Dr. Raul Vasquez from G-Bond, who's respected doctor, Dr. Gales, other ones that are in the community that can talk to individuals. Pastor Mark Blue, the head of our local NAACP, Second Baptist Church in Lackawanna. These are individuals that they can talk to their parishioners. They can talk to individuals even if they're not part of their church and say, listen, you need to get this to save your life. Look at people who've died that we know. So once again, they may not trust me, but they may trust Pastor Pointer. They may trust Dr. Vasquez. They may trust Pastor Blue. And so those are the ways of overcoming a lot of questions that often exist in communities of color.
In terms of the property tax rate, sorry to jump around, you gave kind of a long briefing. In terms of the county property tax rate, how much is that attributable to just the market value of real estate going up so dramatically over the course of the last 6 to 8 years?
Well, we have seen levy growth in the last few years. We're not going to deny that, as we've seen new buildings, many new buildings, whether it's a subdivision in Lancaster or Hamburg where there's new subdivisions, or new buildings that are being constructed right in Buffalo. Good example, Braemiller Market right in downtown Buffalo, or the apartment complex right next to it. So it's a combination. People think, assessment growth is bad. Well, we're controlling the assessment growth, first off. But for many years, our community had no assessment growth, and that caused a huge problem. I mean, we were seeing these tremendous differences in valuations, and people would come in from outside the area and they say, I can't believe the houses are so cheap. They were less expensive. Now, if you've invested in a parcel of property, just bought it 10 years ago, your cost of your property is much higher. But what we're doing is we're controlling the assessed value by reducing the tax rate. So if we just let the tax rate grow every year without addressing it, voting over the tax cap and so forth, then taxes would be skyrocketing exponentially in Erie County, but we are controlling it. So someone who had a house that the assessment's the same, equalization rate's the same, you're gonna pay less in taxes next year than you did this past year. I'm not adverse to assessment growth, especially when it comes from new construction. I think we should all be happy for assessment growth as associated with new construction, because it also in the long run means that each and every one of us with pre-existing structures have to pay less of the pie. That's a good thing.
But in terms of the amount of revenue you anticipate coming in from property tax, with the reduction, you're still getting the same or larger amount, right?
Yeah, we're growing by how much in levy?
About 3%.
3% growth in the levy.
So the property tax rate goes down, you still gain 3%.
We're still gaining. But inflation is literally 5 to 6%. So a good example, our construction costs have gone up dramatically, whether it's road construction or building work, because of the cost of concrete, the cost of steel. So we're not growing at the same rate of inflation as our community. So we're not, so we're if we were, we'd basically be, our tax levy growth would be double. But we're keeping it under the tax cap, and we're paying for increased costs. And one of the things I have to do in the next year, we got a couple big contracts that are coming due that are gonna have to be renegotiated with our blue collar union, our Sheriff's Road Patrol union. Those contracts are coming up. And while we don't put set amount aside in the budget for future contracts because they have to be negotiated, we do know that they're gonna be increasing costs probably associated with it. And even on the current contracts, we have cost of living adjustments and raises for employees. So most employees, unless they're at the highest scale, most employees will be receiving a salary increase next year due to a cost of living adjustment. Got to pay for it. Most of those are 2.5%. So 3% growth in the levy to help pay for 2.5% growth in our salaries, it balances out.
Proof of
Yes, Chris.
vaccinations at the Bills games, how did
Yes.
that go yesterday, and how many people have been turned away?
There were more yesterday that were turned away. Let me just take a look. I'll give you a number. Gotta get the right information. The question was proof of vaccinations at the Bills game. How did it go? Were turned away. Where is it? Seem to have lost it. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it's here. Oh yeah, here it is. The Department of Health did 666 spot checks. Because remember, the people that are coming in are being confirmed by the Bills unless they see something that they think is goofy. So there were 666 spot checks. There were 91 calls to our nurses to confirm something that didn't seem right. So our sanitarian nurses reviewed 91 specialized ones that were brought from the Bills to us. 14 were not allowed in. And the sheriffs had to assist us on 3 of the 14.
Do people face any penalties if it's a false document?
If it's a false document, yes, they could. And the sanitarians would have that information. I don't know if somebody tried to come up with a fake card, or if what we saw the first week, and I don't have the full report, Chris, what we saw the first week is some people were coming up with like a piece of paper that my doctor says I'm vaccinated. They're like, no. Oh, but we can check. And then they're like, oh, you can actually check? Yeah, give us your ID. We'll look in the system and see if you're vaccinated. That may have happened yesterday, I don't know, but there were 14 individuals who were not allowed in due to not having appropriate proof, whether they tried to fake a card or they just did. So they may have walked up and not had proof. And we have the ability through the NYSA system, that's why 91 of them were turned over to the Department of Health. We could look and see, is this person who they say they are, and are they vaccinated? So even if someone had lost their card, had no proof, we could check. And it sounds like based on the number of things that were turned over to the nurses to confirm, they did do that. But there were 14 individuals based on the report that I had received late last night that were not allowed in.
We
Yes,
just
sir.
got a response into our emails from Controller Stefan Mahaliu.
I'm not responding to the controller.
Okay.
This guy's lost his marbles. He's attacking the good government club right now, seriously. which is a nonpartisan organization. He's attacking a good government club. I'm sure next week he'll be attacking the League of Women Voters. Tom, did you have a question? Are you all right? Okay.
Well, Leslie, you mentioned it briefly, the nurses strike. Do you have a concern for people's safety if this drags out any longer, especially if the COVID numbers rise?
The question was with regards to the nurses strike at Mercy Hospital. Am I concerned with people's safety, especially if the COVID numbers continue to rise? Yeah, I mean, you lose that many available hospital beds and emergency room beds. They are accepting patients, especially those that may have nowhere else to go because the closest is Mercy, and it's a life-threatening situation. But most of their patients are actually being diverted to other hospitals. I get the hospital reports, so we see how many individuals are in hospital, including Mercy, South Buffalo Mercy, that is. So the strike, which affects South Buffalo Mercy primarily, but the contract is being negotiated with regards to Kenmore Mercy and St. Joe's and I think part of Sisters, it needs to get resolved quickly. I've talked to the governor about it. I've talked to the new state operations director, Catherine Garcia, about it. At various times I've talked to Mark Sullivan, the head of Catholic Health, as well as Debbie Hayes, the lead for this area for CWA. And the workers don't want to be on strike. It's as simple as that. They do not want to be on strike. We do not want to see strike breakers coming into our community to man a hospital. And the last thing I want to hear is that we're having trouble taking care of someone as a region because of the strike. So while I support the strikers and their efforts, I think they have legitimate beef. I do believe that it is in the best interest of this community if the strike gets settled as quickly as possible. That's why I've spoken to the governor about it. That's why I believe a mediator has been put in place. And that's why the operations manager for the state of New York and I have talked about it, because we understand the seriousness about this. If a hospital went on strike in New York City, they can handle it. But one hospital here in Erie County does have an impact with regards to service delivery. So I'm hopeful that they can resolve this in the next few days, because the longer it drags on, the worse it actually is for healthcare services in our community. With that, we've been going for an hour. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Budget Director Bob Keating and his team for their good work. I appreciate everyone's support and the work that we've done over the last 18, 19 months with regards to COVID-19. And just want to remind everybody it is still out there. As we noted, there's more than 200 new cases that were recorded on October 2nd. And these are new cases. These are not duplicates. These are people who are having brand new cases, first time COVID-19. So please be careful out there. Wear your mask when you're indoors. It really makes a difference. We require them, and they are recommended in indoor settings. And if you're outdoors, just make certain you be careful. And if you feel that it's uncomfortable and someone feels like they need to wear a mask, you shouldn't criticize them. You should encourage them, saying, good, go ahead, wear your mask. I support you in that, because we want to protect as many people as possible. Thank you, Jennifer from Deaf Access Services, for providing the American Sign Language. And as always, to all, be safe and well.